strategy is key to success. With her unique combination and expertise in both law and HR, Stella is well positioned to help organizations manage potential employment law risks and maintain a high level of workplace efficiency and morale. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into our group chat. We will share them at the end of the presentation. And additionally, please keep your eye on the group chat towards the end for registration links, and also on our for our upcoming events, and also our feedback survey. Please fill out our survey to help us know how you liked our event today. Take it away, Stella.
All right, thank you so much, Kathy, and thanks everybody for having me today. Really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get the PowerPoint up here. Everybody see it? All right, fantastic. Well, thank you again. As Kathy mentioned, I work as an HR consultant. I'm also an employment attorney. So I kind of come at things with an HR best practice mindset, and also an eye towards compliance and employment as well. So you'll probably hear me talking on both ends with regards to inclusive hiring practices. So as you know, this is a topic I'm very passionate about. And I know most of you, hopefully, and if you haven't, I'm sure you can contact her for the information, but were part of Dawn's presentation last week, where she did an excellent job really laying out the foundation and on the elements of diversity and inclusion, what it means, why we should care about it, and essentially how to operationalize it, meaning, you know, the action steps to really start to make change. And, you know, again, I loved when she was telling her personal stories. It really brought things to life, and it makes us all realize how critical this conversation is. And really, you know, giving it more than just lip service. I think for many, many years, I've been doing this for over 15 years. Well, 20 years ago, I graduated from law school here in Cleveland at Case Western. And I've always been in the space of employment law. And I've seen probably over the last, I would say 5-10 years, really diversity and inclusion really taking off, and for good reason, for really good reason. In fact, I always say it's no longer just a nice to have, it's a must have. And I've seen a bit of an evolution happen just in terms of how imperative it has become, and a mindset shift around this. So and I say that from a legal perspective, a lot of the diversity training I would do was around the law and the legal obligation. And it was around affirmative action, policies, procedures, Title VII. But as I would, you know, as things have evolved in the workplace, I started to really recognize that this was, you know, the law is truly just a floor. And I always say to my clients, you know, diversity and inclusion is more than just legal compliance. It's more than just checking a box. It's not, you know, if you are going to be the type of organization that is going to just tolerate some level of diversity within your organization, and not truly tap into the strengths that come from valuing a diverse group of individuals within your workplace, then, you know, you're going to miss out. You're going to miss out on some great opportunities. So this is, so today, and I apologize, oh, there it is, okay. Oh, sorry about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about just the objectives, our learning objectives. There is going to be a lot here, so I'm just warning you, but I did tell Lilia that you are more than happy to have a copy of this, and I really would love for you to use this slide presentation as a resource. So there's a lot of detail here. I'm not going to go into excruciating detail, but I'm going to high level this and share some best practices, a framework, and a model. And then we'll wrap up with a summary and some questions at the end. But before I get started into the actual framework, and you'll notice that I'm going to spend a lot of time on the upfront planning, setting goals, because it's that important, getting the buy-in from your team. So, I mean, I'd love to get your questions. I really would love to know where you're coming from with your mindset around diversity and inclusion, particularly in hiring practices, what your challenges have been, what your questions. So please put them in the chat and I will certainly get to them by the end of the presentation here. So those are some of the learnings and the things that we're going to talk about today. Inclusive hiring. So what is it? I always like to start with a formal definition. So inclusive hiring is the process of connecting with, interviewing, and hiring a diverse set of individuals and valuing different backgrounds and opinions. And I really wanted to highlight valuing different backgrounds and opinions because, as we know, part of the process is casting that wider net and expanding our candidate search pool. But really, the most successful diversity and inclusion hiring practices that I have seen really come from and I know I'm going to say this ad nauseum throughout the presentation, but it is truly around getting the buy-in from your organization and having that mindset where you are truly valuing what is happening. So in other words, it's more than just quotas, numbers, checking a box. It's really understanding the why behind why we're going to implement a policy that is going to start to cast that wider net. So there's going to be a lot here. I'm actually going to go over 9 points with you having to do with recruiting, hiring, and then 1 point on onboarding. I'm not going to steal the thunder of the other speakers that are going to be taking it. I'm going to be passing the baton to Bob and Kevin, who are going to talk more about engagement, but I am going to touch a little bit about the onboarding process, because the last thing you want is to go through this process and and capture top talent and some of the best of the best within your organization, and then unfortunately lose them because you haven't created an environment that truly fosters belonging and gives everybody an opportunity for their voices to be heard within the organization. So that's a little bit of the catch-22 with the hiring practices. I have actually worked with organizations and I've helped create and strategize, and we've implemented and a whole hiring process with their hiring managers. And unfortunately, some of the feedback that I've gotten, so this is a real barrier, is that once they get them in the door and get folks in the door that they're so happy to have on board, they're unable to keep them around. So that's a little bit of an issue, and you're spending a lot of time, resources, and energy doing this and upfront, all the upfront work, and the last thing you want is to lose good people. So in other words, one of the things I want to stress here though as well is it's not a perfect process. Nothing is in HR, right? I mean, we're dealing with people, we're dealing with deeply embedded beliefs and behaviors. Some of them, as Dawn has said in the past, things that we might need to unlearn. So we have to be patient with the process. The other thing I'm just going to caution on is making this too prescriptive and imposing it on your workforce and saying, we're going to start a diversity and inclusion, hiring. We're going to start to implement this process, and people saying, whoa, what does this mean? There's some confusion around it, and there may be some pushback. So be patient. In other words, is what I'm trying to say with the process. Everybody is on their own journey, as you know, with diversity and understanding it and understanding the concepts behind implicit bias, stereotyping, negative assumption making. So we just have to be patient, whether it's with our hiring managers, with the teams that we work for, and depending on your position within your organization, even with your senior level executive management team, you're going to have to, whether it's going to them with the business case on why something like this should be implemented from a business perspective and gaining a competitive advantage by doing some of the things we're going to talk about today. But again, patience is going to be key, and being very persistent and committed to this process. So I just wanted to lay that foundation because it's not always easy. It could be easy to talk about because at the end of the day, the second bullet I have here, free from bias and reaching a wider talent pool, that doesn't sound all that difficult, right? I mean, it's like, of course, we're not going to make assumptions and we're going to cast a wide net. We're going to go on other job boards that we've never hit up before to try to expand that talent pool. But again, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the barriers, some of the issues that you might confront that you're just going to have to work through. So, and remember, when we are talking about diversity, we're talking about perhaps even characteristics beyond gender, race, ethnicity, your educational background, your experience. Everybody comes, everybody comes to work with different thoughts, ideas, feelings, level of creativity, innovation, all stemming from our own life experiences. So 45% of employers believe the recruitment tools they have in place right now are ineffective at helping capture diverse candidates. I thought that was really an interesting statistics. I know Dawn shared some really good statistics on why it's so critical to diversify your work environment. The positive effects of that, the bottom line effects of that. So anyways, I thought that was really interesting. If you really look deeply, oftentimes I do a lot of HR audits and I talk to a lot of CFOs, COOs, HR managers that tell me, well, Stella, I mean, we'd love to have a more diverse work environment. I mean, of course we would, right? However, our company is situated in a market where we don't really have a very diverse community here. So I often hear these, and I don't want to call them assumptions. There could be some truth behind the demographics of where your company is headquartered or where your operations are situated. However, I always challenge my clients to think a little outside the box. I mean, think about it. We're a lot of work can be done remotely now. So why are we even limiting ourselves perhaps to just, a few miles outside of our community, outside of our workplace? So something to think about. I wanted to put this slide up here just to explain the overview process. I do, like I said, a lot of creating and implementing and developing of hiring practices. And in doing that, I typically have a framework that I use. So you'll see the framework is the bolded on top: plan, post, and screen during the recruitment process. The hiring process will often entail interviewing, selecting, and job offer. And then when we onboard, it's about welcoming, acclimating, and then evaluating whether or not we've done our due diligence and good faith in getting that person productive and up to speed quickly. So this is sort of the general framework that I tend to use. Now underneath there, I have some bullets. And at the end of the day, if you don't remember anything else, these are kind of short burst, be proactive and plan ahead. Include EEO, equal employment opportunity, and inclusive language in your job descriptions and postings. Casting a wider net. And again, these are just, quick burst. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail and exactly what I mean by these frameworks. But I wanted to basically set the tone in saying that these are the high level things you have to be thinking about. Again, when I walk into an organization and I talk to them about, tell me about your hiring practices. How do you do it? What do what's your process? What's your standard operating procedure around this? I often get, especially because I work a lot with small to mid-sized businesses, and they're like, well, Stella, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. We just wing it. We go with our gut. We ask for referrals. There's not a lot of process behind it. We might post a job on Indeed. We take the job description, we turn it into a post. And then I often hear too, it's done very hastily with not a lot of time and attention provided. So again, I'm going to go back to just being more thoughtful, deliberate, and conscientious around how we're recruiting, how we're hiring, and how we're onboarding. And I don't want this to sound complicated. It doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to put a little bit more thought into how you're doing it. And today I'm specifically talking about not only just the process and how to optimize and make it the best process to, again, what we want to, what's our end goal? What's our end goal? Before coronavirus, we were dealing with one of the tightest labor markets that we've ever had. Employers were really struggling to find good people, any people. And so, you know, a lot of it was just, I would hear things like, we just need warm bodies, you know, and I'd be like, don't say that. You know, let's be a little bit more thoughtful about who we're bringing into your organization. So I know I've already talked a little bit about this. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but the challenges, some of the challenges you're going to face as perhaps a manager within your organization or the owner of your business, or you know, when you start to open up the dialogue and spark the dialogue around diversity, you know, people may misconstrue exactly what you mean by diversity. Their mind might go to, you know, sort of that idea of affirmative action, like, well, oh gosh, we're going to start filling quotas. Or they might initially, you know, they might think we're going to compromise on skills, abilities, and experience because we're going to start bringing in more women, or, you know, whatever they're going to, and, you know, that is not the right approach. But at the end of the day, these are some of the barriers, and we're dealing with deeply embedded thoughts and ideas. And this is going to go back to patience with your organization to help them understand what it really means. Superficial diversity initiatives do more harm than good. I truly believe this. Again, we can talk all day long about numbers and metrics, and we need 15%, you know, in our organization. And again, there's something to be said about that. But at the end of the day, what we really want to try to achieve is the why. Why are we doing it? The purpose behind it, as opposed to just checking that box. Unconscious bias is a barrier to diversity, and I'm going to explain what that looks like in action and how we can try to combat that. And again, we're also dealing with that natural gravitation towards candidates like us. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a thing. It's a thing that happens, and we have to be very cognizant of the wiring of where our mind goes. And that's an entire, we could spend 2 hours talking about implicit bias. You know, so I'm going to have to go through that a little quickly here as well. But if anybody has any questions on that. So we talked about the challenges. Now I'm going to make the case for why you want diversity and inclusion in your hiring practices. And there's 2 reasons. One is the moral, what I call the moral imperative. The second, I call the business case. So going back to the moral imperative, this is really, you know, again, what I believe deeply in, and what you want in a perfect world for everybody to believe in, correct? Right? We want our policies to provide everybody equal opportunity, right? That's what our country was based on: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we want to be able to give everyone within our society, our communities, the opportunity to find their dream job. We want to be able to do that. Another moral imperative, we know that feelings of injustice run deep. They run deep. And so I take what I do to another level. You know, again, in terms of what I do in the workplace, I believe affects our society, our families. There's a ripple effect, right? I mean, when somebody doesn't get a job and they walk away thinking, you know, maybe it was because my name was different, or perhaps, you know, maybe it was because I walked into the interview with a cane. You know, whatever whatever the issue is, you know, you're left with this feeling of injustice. It really, I mean, if you read the research, it can have deep psychological effect that can affect your family, affect society. So, I mean, that is a whole other conversation. The negative assumptions, stereotyping are harmful, obviously, to the fabric of our society. And the moral imperative around, you know, oftentimes I hear people look at diversity and inclusion hiring practice sometimes as mutually exclusive. They say, well, if we do that, then we're going to compromise on knowledge and skills and ability and true talent. And that's not true. That's not true. So we have to remember when we elevate others and we bring in, of course, we're going to want to hire people that have the requisite skills and abilities, of course. But we have to have more of an abundance mindset to not think because we are allowing somebody to have an opportunity that somebody else is going to lose because of that. So something to think about. The business case. Dawn shared statistics around here, so I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but we really need to remember that, and it's a proven fact. Every statistic you look at, every company that I spent a lot of time monitoring what some of the larger organizations are doing across the country. I'm always very curious, how are they, they have these very robust diversity and inclusion programs, and it's like, are they making a difference? What does it really mean? How is it really impacting? And statistic after statistic shows that a more diverse work environment will have huge effects on your creativity, your innovation as a company. It's a fact. And being an attorney, I'm always looking for the facts, and it is a fact. And it will propel your business into a new realm, into a direction that perhaps you never even saw. I mean, I read the testimonials, and I look at these things, and I see such positive impact that a diverse workforce, outperforming competitors. And again, it's simply because we are living in a different day and age, right? I mean, we've evolved as a workplace overall. Companies really are, the standard operating procedures are there. In order for a company to really start to have exponential growth, it's not so much about the technical skills and ability. It truly is about capturing talent that is going to bring innovation into your work environment. That really is what is going to differentiate you as a business, and that's ultimately going to be your value proposition to your clients and customers. So again, there is obviously a business impact to capturing a wider array of thought and talent within your organization. And again, from a legal perspective, from an employment law perspective as well, you want to make sure that you do not have hiring practices that are in place that cause a disproportionate impact on a certain class or group of employees. So there's case law out there, failure to hire, you have some sort of perhaps pre-employment testing that's in place that seems facially neutral. It seems like it's something that would benefit your organization. You're testing everybody within your organization, for example, through some sort of pre-hire assessment, but it's causing a disproportionate impact on a certain race, on a certain class of people. So that does happen, and sometimes I've had to go in and vet that out a little bit to make sure, you've got to be careful here, because I think you're eliminating an entire class of people because you have this test that you're telling me is job related, but at the end of the day, it is disproportionately impacting a group. So here, 15, 20 minutes later, let's get started on the actual framework. I call it a 5-3-1 approach to inclusive hiring practices. It is something that I have come up with as a framework that I do really believe works. So at the end of the day, if nothing else, you will walk away with a framework. And again, going back to why I have 5 points I'm going to talk to under inclusive recruiting. And then 3 points I'm going to talk about under inclusive hiring. And then 1 point I'm going to touch on in inclusive onboarding. So with inclusive recruiting, the first and probably one of the most important factors when you are going to launch an initiative like this is to set goals and announce what you're doing to your team and to your company. So don't just wing it. Again, it goes back to what Dawn says about, not just being lip service. You know, I think we need to hire, you know, some different type of people within our organization. What does that mean? What does that look like? How are you going to go about it? So again, it's part of the planning phase. It really truly does lay the foundation of everything else. So remember, before you go to market for new hires, take the time to revisit your goals. Why are you doing this? What are your core values? If you have a core value that's respect for the individual, if it's around innovation and creativity, if it's about wanting to make sure that you are responsive to clients, these are all great core values to have in place. So you have to make the connection between your business goals. Say you want to capture a new market. You know, whatever your business goal or core values are, tie it back to the reason why you ultimately want to bring in employees into your organization that are going to effectuate those goals, that are going to promote your goals and your values. So if you can, the better you can make the connection there, the better buy-in you're going to get from your team when they understand that this is not just about, you know, at the end of the day, nobody wants to be in an underrepresented group and be the token person in your organization for the sake of diversity. We all want to be able to make impact, and we all want to be able to provide value and contribute value. So that starts with opening up the dialogue and making sure that everybody within your organization knows that this plan and this strategy is just as important as any other strategy, as your marketing strategy, as your finance strategy. You know, your D&I strategy is up there with it. And it is not just the realm of HR. It's not an HR thing. It's not an employment law thing. You know, that's for legal to think about and legal department to worry about. Remember, this is a company-wide initiative. So again, it may be a bit of a mindset shift, but that's how you really have to start to think about this. Publicly announce the initiative and share what skills and abilities will move your organization forward. Again, this isn't just about, you know, we need to get different people within our organization. It's we need to get a diverse group of employees, managers at all levels within our organization in order to move our organization forward into the future and meet our business goals and objectives. So first and foremost, we want to put a lot of time and attention behind that plan. In fact, even within that plan, make it tangible, make it, you know, come up with a budget, you know, commit to putting some dollars and cents behind the things that you're going to do differently. And that's something, being a consultant, that, you know, that I can help with, that another consultant can help you devise a very solid framework and plan from the beginning. Because I'm telling you, the better the plan, the better chance of having success. Conduct a hiring audit. I do a lot of comprehensive human resource audits where I'll look at hiring practices, to performance management, to, you know, overall talent acquisition and all sorts of other things. But in this particular case, the scope of your audit is going to be around your hiring practices. So I know audit often scares people when I use the word audit. You can call it an assessment. I call it a deep dive. Whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, you got to get real. You got to get real with what you have going on right now. So this is the easiest way to explain what an audit does for a client. It looks at the current state and it benchmarks it against a future desired state. So where are we now and what are our aspirational goals? And again, I'm going to go back to mindset. I often hear the phrase organizational inertia. Well, Stella, this all sounds great, but guess what? You know, we run on autopilot. These are the things that we do, and this is how we do it. So just, you know, again, you have to, you know, and part of the audit process and maybe bringing in a professional or somebody with an objective view on things can help identify some of the gap areas. So that's what we're going to be looking for. We're going to look at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And we're going to look at all your job postings, what we call an ideal candidate profile, your employment application. We're going to look for the red flags. We're going to look for opportunity for improvement. Educate your team. So don't jump into until everyone understands. This is pretty self-explanatory. We've already talked about that confirmation bias. We need to do a little training and we need to do some education. So put your plan together, do the audit, and then go back to your team and educate on the why behind the reasons why we're going to start to conduct our hiring practices around diversity and inclusion principles. And develop the right message. Okay, this is really, really important because when I go in and do the audit, I often see things immediately, probably because my eye is trained to pick up on it, but I see certain words that are used in job postings on websites that are often, you know, you wouldn't even, you're so involved and you're just interested in, you're like, we just got to hire people and we got to get the right, you know, of course I want to get the right people. And of course I'd love for the people within my organization to represent, you know, a diverse group, but they're not, you're not really paying attention to, and it's okay because I mean, you're just in it, you need to run your business, you're moving a million miles an hour, and oftentimes some of these things are overlooked. So certain words that are on an application, for example, from a legal perspective, I still see on employment applications questions around an arrest record. So you can ask about convictions, misdemeanors, felonies. You can ask about those things, but you cannot ask about an arrest record. So that's a legal issue that I often see. Also salary history, you know what you were making in the past, that can potentially have a disproportionate impact on women. And so if you're asking about, well, what did you make in your past job? So anyways, you got to be careful with what you're asking. The other thing I see a lot of on postings are words like rock star, ninja. We want somebody that's going to dominate, you know, the sales market. Well, that typically will attract more men, for example. Or I've seen things, you know, we need young, energetic, or fresh blood. You know, that may have an effect on somebody, an older worker, you know, somebody in their 40s, 50s, 60s that are like, well, maybe that's not me, and they won't even apply for the job. So again, we're missing out on opportunities when we have a language that is not inclusive. So we need to really kind of hone in on that, really scrutinize some of the job postings around that. Another method to try to bolster your, you know, taking some of the bias out of your hiring practices is trying blind recruiting. I've talked to some organizations that really adhere to this. They think it's very important. They do not want, I mean, they really do believe, they're like, I know I have bias. I know it's in there somewhere. It's floating around. It's, you know, I mean, again, we all have it, right? So they do things on purpose, structural things that they add to their hiring practices that try to remove some of that bias. So they'll remove names, and you know, they'll develop a hiring team. They'll have 2, 3, 4 people on a hiring team in order to try to, you know, again, allow some of that bias to dissipate. They'll call people out on their bias. I mean, when you get to a point where you have cultivated an organization that's so accepting of this and understands and has that personal awareness to say, you know, we are doing things that, you know, we're disqualifying candidates based on, you know, we're thinking to ourselves. I mean, I literally just had a conversation the other day with a company that's hiring, and the hiring manager said, I don't know, I don't feel like I could go out and have a beer with this guy. You know, I mean, I don't know if we could, you know, I don't know if I could have a beer with him. We're really not on the same wavelength. I just don't think he's going to be a great cultural fit. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, again, there's something to be said about that gut and that likability. I get it, but we've got to understand why we are saying these things. What does it really mean? And I heard a phrase the other day that I really liked, and that was give differences the benefit of the doubt. We often think to ourselves, we want people to be a good cultural fit. And sometimes we inadvertently start to only want people like us. And that's a problem. So I've actually even said that to the gentleman I talked to the other day. I said, I want you to write this phrase down, and I want you to keep it front and center on your candidate evaluation form. And I want you to write, give differences the benefit of the doubt. Try to hire somebody that's actually different, out of box thinking, someone that you would have never thought you would have brought into the organization. Try it. So these are some of the things that you could potentially look at. I mean, there's some sophisticated software systems now to help with blind recruiting methods. But if you're a smaller organization, I hate for you, I have some small businesses I work for, and I hate when they throw up their hands and say, I don't have the money to do this. I don't have the budget for this. No, there are small things you can still do that are cost effective to still implement some blind hiring methods. So inclusive hiring, this is kind of like the next phase, right? We start with recruiting. We want to cast a wider net. We want to put the plan together. We want to develop really sound and inclusive sounding job postings. And then now we're into the hiring process, right? The interview process. And this is like years ago. I used to spend a lot of time in my trainings talking about legally permissible and impermissible questions on an interview script. And that's fine. We still need to be very mindful of the type of questions that we ask, but most people know that you can't ask how old a candidate is. Most people know you can't ask, how many kids do you have? Most people are now familiar with it. The only time I see somebody get a little bit in trouble with this is when it becomes a casual conversation and they're trying to connect. And so again, it's not malicious. It's just, you start to have this conversation, and then, suddenly you're you may be asking questions that potentially could be legally problematic. So that's the employment law legal side of it. But again, now we're at a point where we want to take it to the next level. We want to be able to ask questions, not what are your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, I mean, that's a question that's commonly asked, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but we want to open it up a little bit more. Think about behavior. I don't call it, the HR best practices and the authorities out there call it behavioral based questioning. And what that means is that you're asking questions that are going to elicit a response that's telling a story. You're going to get your candidates to open up, and you're really going to be able to understand a little bit more of where they're coming from and who they are. And those are questions like, when was the last time? Or tell me about a time when. What can you tell me about your last experience with this? Or tell me about the last time you received constructive feedback at your job. So again, I've been developing some question scripts, interview scripts around this type of questioning, because I feel that you really can get somebody to open up a little bit more. And the first bullet point, it's a candidate's market. What I'm trying to explain to employers, and some of them don't like to hear this, but the bargaining power has shifted a little bit. People have options, at least pre-coronavirus, right? When we were dealing with a very low unemployment rate. So, I'm just like, hey, get used to it. People are going to ask you about your pay practices. They want, they're going to ask questions about flexibility. I think about my first job out of law school 20 years ago. I don't think I ever asked the question, what is the workplace culture like here? Or how much vacation time am I going to get? But these are questions that are common now, and it's okay. People really relish their work-life balance. They want to know they're working for an organization that's thoughtful about certain things. So be prepared for that as an employer. Making the offer. So you want to craft a formal offer letter, and then you want to highlight the EEO policies and benefits that you offer. So again, now you found this great catch candidate, diverse candidate, would, be thrilled if they accepted your offer. Well, now you really got to, the onus is on you as the business owner to be able to showcase some of the benefits that you offer that would appeal to a more diverse candidate. And those could be things like flex work arrangements, maybe for a mom, that needs time, they want to work a 10 to 3 schedule. Be a little bit more open-minded, understand that if you don't offer perhaps some flexibility and you're going to stick to that 9 to 5, very traditional mindset, and you're not going to offer that, you're going to lose out on women, quite frankly, that have children, for example. So again, you have to really start to think about the type of benefits that you are offering, and express that during the time where you are talking about. And again, this is a great moment in time to start to talk and highlight your EEO policies. Put them front and center in your employee handbook. Make sure everybody is aware that you understand not only your legal obligation as an employer, but that you are really living and breathing your values, and make sure that that is reflective. So I know Dawn and I talk a lot about this when we talk about strong organizational cultures. We talk a lot about alignment. So you want to align policies with actions, with behaviors. It all has to align. Otherwise, what you're left with is what I call cognitive dissonance. So you're saying one thing, but you're acting out in a different way. So you have to make sure that this is continually re-emphasized over and over again in your communications. Pick 1 to 3 metrics to improve. So now you have your plan, you have your goals, you've put together the framework, you've brought in a consultant who's reviewed and revised all your tools and templates having to do with your hiring process. And you've gone through the, you've attempted to do, you're beta testing this, you're actually putting it into action. So you're going to want to evaluate your progress. And you're going to want to try to develop some metrics around that. So I know earlier I said, don't make this about numbers and metrics. But now I'm saying there is a piece to this that's critical in the evaluation of it. So it's okay to have 1 to 3 metrics. Don't overwhelm yourself. Have a few, goals in mind that you're going to tell yourself, we want to move the needle. You're not going to have some overnight transformational change. If you do, I think that's fantastic. And it does happen. Sometimes organizations are like, we have been stuck in the mud forever. We are making massive change. And I don't care if everybody's even on board with this. We're just going to do it. And, and that's fine too. That's more of a radical approach. But the way that I typically see it is, pick 1 to 3 metrics. And, that could be as easy as, we're going to go from doing these job boards to expanding our candidate pool by attending these job fairs. Be very specific. We're going to get on this platform. We're going to try this social media group that we've never tried before with our posting. So be very specific with the type of new initiatives you're going to have in place. So finally, inclusive onboarding. And like I said, I don't want to steal the thunder of the next speakers that are going to be speaking on the panel, as I know that they're going to take this and talk about it a little bit more. But I do want to just mention inclusive onboarding, because now you have a candidate that has accepted your offer, that is super excited to be part of your organization. And this is key. Onboarding is a pivotal moment for making employee feel included from day one. So don't drop the ball here. It's just something that I often see and that I'm very, fanatic about, because I just want to make sure that employee continues to feel safe, that they are continued to feel that they're, from day one, you want to set meetings, you want to make introductions, you want to perhaps have a mentor or a buddy or a point of contact person that's going to continue to facilitate that type of, we want to get to know you as a person. that is part of hiring an inclusive hiring practices, is really allowing that person to shine from day one. So don't suddenly, hire somebody and then, relegate them off to a cubicle and say, good luck. You want to make sure that there's a structured onboarding approach, make it warm and welcoming. Really pay attention to this. The tone from the beginning is key. So one of the last things I'm going to mention here, it's time to step up and do more. It's not good enough to say we will value diversity. It's time that we actually put some meat behind the things that we've been talking about. It's okay to start small. We've got to start somewhere. And in fact, everything I continue to read states that the hardest barrier to initiating a process and a policy like this or an initiative is really just the first few steps. It's really getting that plan in order. People often feel very overwhelmed. They don't know what direction to go to. They don't know really what it means. They don't know what resources to be tapping into. So, get somebody on board that can help you with that and just start to make those changes. So a great quote that I've always liked, and I feel that it is most relevant right now with what we're dealing with in our workplaces and in the general climate. And so that is my inspirational slide, and this is my very practical slide of the tools and templates. At the end of the day, we know that we're going to have documentation and things in order. And again, this goes back to the alignment piece within your organization. So one thing I'm going to repeat it again because it's that important to have a healthy, strong, positive, and productive work environment. You have to have everything aligned, and it's not always going to be perfect, but we've got to try to get there. So all of our tools and templates and forms, everything we put in front of our employees has to speak the language of EEO, of inclusiveness. And again, it can still have your legal protections in it. It can still have a formality about it, but you still want to have that type of language in all these documents. So I spend an inordinate amount of time on a job offer letter. I don't use standardized anything anymore. I really do believe, there is something to be said about having that template, having that tool that you can sort of repurpose, but we have to be very mindful about the type of information we continue to put out there. So the last thing I'm going to leave you with is we have a blended workforce, and it's here to stay for good reason. And we want to continue to cultivate that and foster it. So we want to be able to speak in terms of leveraging the strengths of a blended workforce by being open to new ideas. And this is just one quick thing. And again, not to steal the thunder of the folks that are going to be talking to you next about this, but these are we have to start to shift the language and see things through a different lens. And we start to build on our, inclusive vocabulary within our organization. These are just two examples, two things that I often talk about in D&I training. And that is cultural competency. And these are things that you might want to start to talk about during your hiring practices that you as an organization believe in. Your cultural competency is just as important a skill as a technical skill that you are bringing into your organization. And it's something that can be worked on and mastered over time. It's like a muscle. Think about it as a muscle that you continue to build. So you focus on ways to improve relationships. Building your cultural competency means you as a leader, you facilitate meetings, gatherings, ways to do that, to bring people's stories to life, to include them in the conversation, to bring them to the table. That's how we start to build our cultural competencies as individuals. And the more culturally competent that we become as a person, our organization starts to rise in their level of cultural competency. I call it a critical mass Once you have the majority of your employees, it's like emotional intelligence, right? The more emotionally intelligent we start, our folks are within our organization, our company becomes, our organization starts to become more emotionally intelligent. So one of my favorite phrases is asking empowers, telling diminishes. Somebody said this to me once and I thought it was beautiful. I thought to myself, if only, if you don't remember anything else about how to try to cultivate an inclusive environment, one thing you can do is just ask questions. Ask questions. I know Dawn talked about that. Constructive conflict is another theory. It's another concept that means no matter if you have 2,000 or 2,000 people under one roof, you are going to have dispute. You're going to have conflict. You're going to have issues that people are not going to get along all the time, particularly if we're different, right? We're coming from different perspectives, different backgrounds. But you as a leader, you need to be able to work with your team to effectively resolve issues with, I use words like dignity and respect. And with dignity and respect. And you start to build that language within your organization. We're not going to attack the person, we're going to attack the issue. We're going to look at things more objectively. So, when we start to build that type of dialogue into our meetings, into our conversations, we start to build a more inclusive environment. So thank you so much. I know I'm saving a few minutes here for some questions, but really appreciate your time. And looking forward to our next panel, which is next week. And if you have any questions, please contact me. My information is here on the slide. But again, if you have any questions right now, would be more than happy to take your questions. And I know that was a lot. I hope it wasn't totally overwhelming, but I wanted to at least provide some detail to the framework that I was providing. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, Lilia.
Sure. So I do have a question that someone posted in the chat, and this is from Marianne, and she wants to know, is there any specific EEO language that you recommend being in a job description or posting?
Yes, well, so let me just explain one thing really quick too about job descriptions and postings, just to a little clarification, because oftentimes what I find organizations do, they'll take their formal job description and then they'll just turn it quickly into a posting and then slap it up there. But these two documents are different to some extent. Okay, so first with the job description, what we want to do there is, of course, include the requisite knowledge, skills, and abilities, and the experience that we believe is required to do the job well, right? Okay, so we do need to put some thought and attention behind that. The thing that I'm telling employers now to do a little bit more of is to include in your job description the what I call soft skills, but I hate to even use that phrase because they're truly not soft. They're the things that really matter in today's environment and the type of people that you want. Things like taking the initiative and working collaboratively, around, language around teamwork and team orientation. Any language that you could put into the job description itself that has language around your values having to, aligned with inclusion and diversity, meaning working well with other people and respecting and appreciating their opinions. And so anything along that, and it takes some effort. It takes time to really start to weave that into your job description. So that's number one, is develop. If you don't already have that in your job description, make sure you have a list of attributes and characteristics in addition to the technical skills. So that's number one. Number two, the other thing from a legal perspective you're going to want to have in your job description is language around reasonable accommodation, stating that this job description is subject to the ADA. So you're going to want to have, as long as an employee can perform the essential job duties and functions, you as an employer have a legal obligation to make necessary accommodations for that employee and a candidate that's applying for the job. So that's a whole legal analysis, but you want what's called an ADA disclaimer in your job description that states if you get a moment in your life, employee, that you have a serious medical condition or a disability that qualifies under the ADA, that we as an employer will do our part in reasonably accommodating you to make sure that you are able to perform the essential functions of the job that are listed in the job description. So from a legal perspective, you're going to want that as well. You're also going to want some language on that you are an equal employer, equal employment opportunity employer, that you do not discriminate against any individual based on race, gender, ethnicity, culture. You're going to want that spelled out as well. So you're going to want to transfer some of that into the job posting. In the job posting, you're also going to want to have the EEO for sure, you know, disclaimer or statement that's bold and, you know, that's there for them to see. And you're, again, the opening of your job posting is going to almost be, think of it as a marketing tool. And Lily, I know you're in marketing. So, I mean, HR has now had to wear the hat of kind of a marketing expert, because not only is it important to be able to, you know, you don't want a candidate to look at your posting. So a lot of times the job descriptions are more formal, in other words. That's why I don't suggest just moving that over to a job posting. You want to spend a little bit more time on the posting. You want to make it more of a marketing piece, at least initially. You want to showcase your values, you know, what type of organization that you have, that you value, you know, diversity, collaboration, teamwork, that you know, any language that you can think of around a sense of belonging, inclusiveness. So you're going to want to wordsmith that a little bit. But again, I do warn people, I'm like, if you're going to put that out there for the world to see, you want to make sure that you are actually, you know, walking the talk. You want to walk the talk. So I'm really, you know, keen on that as well. But, you know, again, for job description, job posting, you are going to want to have the legal verbiage in there, EEO, the reasonable accommodation, and then you're going to want to take it a step further to start to paint the picture of the organization that you ultimately want to cultivate. And you're going to do that through your website, through your job postings. It doesn't have to be long. In fact, you know, keep it, you know, short, concise. I think that that's more impactful these days. And, you know, be careful, of course, list out your essential job functions. But what I find happens with organizations, it's these like little tweaks that make a huge impact. I'll question them. I'm like, what does this mean? Why do you have that? What does that requirement actually do for moving your organization forward? And they're like, I don't know, we've always had that, or we've always required a four-year college degree. I mean, but do you really need it? Are we excluding people inadvertently by having language in there that is not necessary anymore, or requirements that may not, you know, is that really what we're prioritizing in this job? So really, really be thoughtful around that. Hopefully that was helpful.
I was going to move on to the next question, just because I want to make sure we address people's questions, because we're running a little bit over, but that's okay. First of all, I want to acknowledge that Brian said that this was very thorough and helpful, and I agree. Sometimes we don't get people filling out the survey links, but at least this is a little bit of feedback you can take with you now. And I want to thank Brian personally for being our token male here today. I do, as a sidebar, and we can all talk about this offline if we want to, I do think it's interesting that there are predominantly female attendees in this conversation, and I think that speaks to a greater issue that we have about diversity and inclusion. But again, that's a conversation for another day. We do have another question from Elise, and she said, do you have any insight on how to make websites accessible so that individuals with visual impairments can easily access and apply?
I mean, that is fantastic that we're even, you know, thinking about these things. That's what I mean about sometimes we take things for granted that people are, I mean, I've had organizations that, you know, that have blatantly said to me, gosh, I mean, if we had somebody that was in a wheelchair, I don't think they'd be able to take the elevator up to her office. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, that's problem. That's a problem. But this is yet another great insight into, we have to make sure that we are readily accessible and that we are, available to people this is a very good question as far as making your website accessible to those with visual impairments. I am absolutely, Lilia, you may know a little bit more about this in terms of the marketing piece to that. I know that there are some organizations out there that will help with that piece of it.
There's third-party software options. So you just have to do a little bit of research, but I know I worked on Kent State University's website, and that was something that we had to implement on their website because they have to make it accessible for everyone. So Elise, you're the one who asked the question. Yeah. So I can do a little bit of digging for you. I don't remember what service we use, but I can do a little bit of digging for you, and I'm happy to follow up with an email to you about those types of services. But they're absolutely out there because, yes, accessibility needs to address all of those issues. So I will follow up with you. I think that's it.
Those are the questions that would come up in an audit, and that's why I suggest when you do the hiring audit, you'll talk about accessibility. You go through sort of a systematic method of questioning where, because again, it's oftentimes, I've even read some of the questions. I'm like, geez, I would never even think to think about this, that this could be a barrier to somebody applying for my job here. So yes, I think that's the value that the assessment or the audit process will bring clarity to, an organization that perhaps never thought about some of these things. So.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank Stella again. I want to thank everybody who attended. I've already gone ahead and sent out the email to you guys with all of the contact info for the attendees, as well as all of the links for upcoming events. This was just part 2 in our 4-part series. So please make sure you join us for 3 and 4. 3 is about retaining your diverse employees and what you can do to help with retention. And then part 4 is a panel discussion where we bring back the previous panelists, as well as add in Vaughn Johnson from the Urban League of Cleveland. And I think that's going to be a really powerful event as well. So please make sure you sign up for those. And as always, please do the survey links so we can improve our events and make them better for you guys. We appreciate your time. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you at one of our next events. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Have a great day.